So over the years, Patrik presented the Oxygen users meetup, sometimes surprising me how he used some of the functionality in Oxygen. So I'm looking forward to see what he did this year. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Patrik Stellmann.
Okay, so hello everybody. As you have just heard, my name is Patrik Stellmann. I'm working as system architect with GDV DL. We are a service provider for the German insurance industry, and we use Oxygen as editor for our DITA documents that we use to publish the documentation of, for instance, the web servers we provide for the insurance companies. And well, what I show you today, it's also part of our open source project, DITA Schema, or DITA Schema. It's the repository, and one of the projects within is the resolver. It's just to convert by some magic stuff and custom to be resolved to standard DITA. So it should be compatible with any output you want to use by DITA OT. So, as you can will understand, when we provide services, for instance web services, the documentation of the XML interface is very important, and part of the documentation should always be some sample code. So, and samples are only helpful if they are valid and they match with the actual definition. So let's just look at some sample. So here we have some structure, describe XML structure defining a common person with some fields, the name and type of a person, and also including some type information, referring here to an enumeration, and also referring to other XML structures. So the first common step in DITA to use sample code is a code block element. So what you get from this, you have a sample, but depending on how quick you can read XML, you will notice there are plenty of bugs in this. And if now I validate my document, well, validation is done, document is valid. Yeah, of course, according to standard DITA, it's valid, but in my XML or in my domain describing a sample of a person, it's not valid. But how can the framework know? So, and furthermore, I can write anything here, and I start entering in curly an angular bracket. Oxygen doesn't help me at all with it because it's simple text. So I'm very got comfortable with the authoring support Oxygen provides for editing XML content, so I'm quite disappointed from this code block. So what we use, so conclusion for the first part, using code block, okay, we got an XML sample, but it's almost everything missing. No syntax highlighting, no support, no assistance at all. So let's try to make it better. And the next step, so it looks the same, and now I can set the output class attribute. I can set this to language XML, and okay, it looks better. It's we have syntax highlighting for XML, but still there is no support when I edit it. It won't help me automatically inserting the and tag, so it just looks a little bit better. But now the framework knows, okay, this code is supposed to be XML, so I have at least a chance to add some validation. And what I did is now I wrote some schematron rule to check for a code block element, or for an element with a class attribute containing code block, just as you do it with DITA, and also with the output class language XML. And I want to validate the content if it's valid XML. It could be done with Hexen, but I decided to use some Java code. You can access from XSLT quite easily Java code. And so what I did, I implemented very short static method in Java, where the most important part is here, where I parse the input as string, and if there is any exception, I just return the exception. Otherwise, I return null. So my schematron will just check if there is an error message. I present the error message. Otherwise, there is no error. So what I did, I assign a validation scenario, XML code block, and now when I validate it, here you see, okay, invalid XML code block. This is the part of the schematron message I wrote, and then the exception text comes. So I can start now solving it. Oh, the screen is too small. Okay, so it was complaining about here missing angular bracket, and it will also complain about other stuff. I just fix it quickly, and I validate again. One more address. Oh, okay, I mistyped. Now it looks better. Okay, now it's valid. Okay, now it's at least valid XML. So what we did, okay, we set output class and we add some schematron rule. So what we got syntax highlighting and XML syntax validation. But no authoring assistance, I have to take care of everything on my own. And still, there is no match if this is really the sample of the structure I defined above. So let's move on to the next step. There is another element in standard DITA, a CodeRef. As you might guess from the name, you can reference some code, XML file. So outline, we can see in my sample I have a code block element, and within this code block element I have a CodeRef referring to another XML file, and I can just open it by clicking on the link, and now I'm in text mode and I can write my XML, and now this is what I'm used to from Oxygen. I can just edit, and if I add a new element, it will give me automatically insert the end tag and stuff like this. It will validate and so on. It will validate for XML. Still not semantic, only syntax. So, but it's already quite nice. So yeah, use CodeRef. And again, if just let me go back, remove my fixes. And again, I want to validate that the XML file I'm referring to is valid XML, because I'm referring any file. And well, you see, it's still no valid XML, and my validation says it's all fine. So again, I can define a schematron rule. This time I'm looking for a CodeRef element within a code block element that refers to a file that ends with XML. So this is my rule to check it should be valid XML. And in this case, I don't need to report any more detailed error messages, because if I want to fix the errors, I have to go to text mode in Oxygen anyway, and then I will get all the assistance. So I just want to check, is the file valid? And this I can do with this already standard function doc available. This will check for, does the file exist, and can I read it as XML? So again, I will just assign my validation scenario. So, and it will complain that, well, the file doesn't exist or contains no valid XML. Obviously, the file does exist because I can see, and when I jump to the file, I can fix it. So what we have managed to get in this step, syntax highlighting, because I'm in author mode, in text mode, and I get authoring assistance for XML syntax. Still no semantic assistance, and I'm getting some overhead because I have to deal with a separate file, I have to create it, and I have to link it. So this is less convenient than directly typing within my code. But you see we have some more steps, so we will get closer to the best way. So this is the same, XSD. Okay, now let's address the next. I want to have semantic authoring support. So Oxygen cannot provide me some authoring assistance in the semantics because it doesn't know anything about the semantics. All I told it before, I'm editing an XML file. So what I can do is I can create a schema, XML schema, assign it to my sample file, which I did here. We can take a look here. So it will, it describes a person with a name, also with all the type restrictions I wrote in my documentation, with enumeration and stuff like that. And now, when editing this file, I can get also semantic validation and, well, let's start with the semantic validation. So you see, okay, content 5 is not valid, only 1, 2, or 3 of this enumeration. So I have semantic validation and even semantic authoring assistance. If I press Control space, I will see I can insert 1, 2, or 3, and I will even get here the description, which I wrote in my email schema as annotation. So I have all the support I can even dream of, and it's all information I have in my. Oh no, it's. Let me check. There are simple types. This was the file that describes the enumeration type of person, and here natural person is 1, 2 is legal person, or 3 is an organization. So all the information that I need to write this XSD file, it's already there in my documents. So I can create very nice schemas. So what I get, this was the wrong one. So one problem, now my sample file, it has to refer to a schema. So it's no longer only a person, but I have also added an element around example that contains this link to the schema. So that's a problem. And of course I have to manually create an XSD file, and not only create it once, but I have to maintain it, because usually from my experience writing documentation first it's okay, but then things change and then it gets worse and worse. So maintaining is also very important. But what I have really full authoring assistance within my XML file, and even if I want to create a new sample from scratch, so I will just insert a person element, and it will, as Oxygen does for XML, with a schema attached, it will insert automatically all mandatory elements. So I have to think less as an author. So the problems: unclean code and overhead for manually creating XSD files. So let's first address this unclean code and start getting some of my custom stuff from the from my DITA Semia project. So the task is, I have some file which I want to refer, and I want to include it into my document, but not exactly as it is, but with some modifications. And that's exactly one use case for XSLT CodeRef. So there's already CodeRef, standard DITA, where I can refer to another DITA file and include some or display some content. And my XSLT CodeRef, it just extends this concept by an XSLT script applied to it. So what I did, I insert here is just a simple div element, and the div element, it provides support for my XSLT CodeRef, or XCR in short, attributes. And so all I have to do, I have to provide is a script. So I use I just wrote my script in the same, I placed it here, XML sample. And I have to provide a source, or I can provide a source. If I don't provide it, then it will have some default behavior. But in this case, I want to refer to the person.xml. And now if I refresh it, it should look good. Okay, and yes, it does. As you can see, I provide, for my XSA CodeRef, I provide 3 buttons, one to refresh, one to jump to the XML source, so in this case my sample code, the same as before, and one to the script. And as you can see, so this script has to do two things. First, it has to create a code block, and within the code block I want to serialize the content of the example element, because the example element is just the wrapping element that refers to the schema, and then I have some simple serialization. So what is also nice, I have some custom XSLT script to create a code block from my code sample. So what I can also do, for instance, it's a use case for us in our PDF. We have a limited line length. So if there are some texts that are too long, or the content is too long, we want to add some wrapping inside. So imagine that this line would be too long, and you want to change the formatting. Here I have just assigned a different script, just XML sample 2. Here you said XML sample 2, and this one will check if the line would exceed 30 or something characters. It will just add line breaks and indent the text content as well. So if I now edit my XML file and I just make this be longer. Again? So I refresh it, and then you see also this one will automatically wrap. You can do this depending on the output. For instance, on HTML output, it doesn't matter. For PDF, it's very useful. So, and for me, it was a chance to again show XSLT CodeRef, or at least one use case. So what we get advantage still, all the authoring assistance for our XML sample, and also some customizable formatting of sample, and no more unclean code. But still, we have overhead for creating and maintaining manually the XSD, and of course, still separate files. So let's move on. So now, I as a human managed to create an XSD file from this definition by hand. So if I can do it, why maybe even the computer can do it for me, so I have to do it on my own. The problem is I'm good at reading documents, computers usually are not. And if you think about, oh no, this was wrong. To implement a script with XSLT, for instance, that creates an XSD from this one, it is quite tough, because you have to deal with some elements that have no semantics in my XML structure domain. They are semantic elements in DITA domain, but I'm not thinking about a DITA document, I'm thinking about describing an XML structure. So I would have to write some horrible code, check if there is some topic with that title starts with XML structure, and I'm looking for some definition list with entries and stuff like this. It's I know what I'm talking, because at the first stage some years ago, that was exactly what I was doing, and maintaining this or writing documents that can be automatically processed, it's no pleasure. You have to take care a lot of validation. So what I did instead, I changed my XML structure. DITA luckily supports specialization, so we can compare these two documents. They look pretty much the same, but this one, let's check the XML. Here you see XML text like XML structure with the name, definition, members, fields, name, the type string, the type enumeration there with a name. So this looks easy to be interpreted by some XSLT. And still, how comes when I switch to author mode, it looks again like a DITA document? That's what another extension what I did. So first, it's no extension. I just added a class attributes accordingly. So for instance, the name of my structure, it's just a topic title, but I specialize it to, in my demo domain, to my specialized elements. But as text content, I have only person. But I want the title to be XML structure and in curly brackets the name. So there's another extension I implemented. It's content by attribute. So I can provide within the schema. Let's just check, jump to the definition. There. So for the in my schema, here I have my name with this class attribute as a common for DITA provided by the schema as default value, and I can in my namespace I can add some prefix or suffix, and I can add static text content. Actually, not only static, I can even add XPath expressions in here. So I can basically make my my custom XML code look like DITA and be edited like DITA just by adding some attributes by the schema. So now it's possible to extract a schema, and let's just take a quick look into the XSL. So I have create here in my main template, I create a schema element and just go through for an XML structure, which is now no text content I'm referring to, but I'm referring to an element with this name. So I can create an element with a name that comes from the XML structure again, and then I could just go through the definition and so on. So what I did, now I can create this, the schema I had to create before manually. I can create it automatically, but I still don't want to have a separate file. So additionally, what I did in my sample file, I no more refer to a fixed XSD file, but I create this XSD file dynamically with this convert protocol that was introduced by George a few years ago. So here, usually in this attribute you would expect some XSD file, but instead I use the convert protocol. The convert protocol, it's just an extension to the URI processing, where I can say I have a processor, XSLT, and style sheet. I use here my create XSD, and some input. I use my person as input. And if I now open this URI, I will. You see, I'm well here on top. You see, so this file doesn't really exist. It was created dynamically by using my DITA custom DITA file as input, applying my XSLT script to extract the schema. So this schema is created dynamically. It's just only created now to be presented. It looks similar to what I created before manually, and I can still validate my file accordingly, even the file doesn't really exist. And okay, I get some semantic complaints about this element should be different. So that's all nice. One drawback, I create my XML schema from this file, but this file refers to some other information. To be more precise, it refers to an enumeration, type of person and gender, and also to another XML structure, address. So I, as a human, know, okay, there must be some other files where these types are defined, but my script doesn't know. So how can I solve this? Of course, I could use the whole DITA map as input, and then my XSLT script would have to go through all the DITA map and stuff like this. But again, this is not what I would like to have. So let's move on to the next stage. and take a look at another extension I did to DITA, and this is advanced key references. So what I did, as you can see now, it looks quite the same as before, but here you have a key symbol and here you have a link symbol, because when I'm defining this XML structure, semantically I'm also defining some key person. So what I did now in the schema, I added some additional default attributes, just like so before we were talking about this prefix XML structure. Now within another namespace, IKD, for implicit key definition, I just say, well, with this element you define a key of type XML structure, and the root, so the element you are actually referring to, is the parent. So I attach this to the name element. So again here, for the name element, so the parent is the XML structure. So when I refer to the key XML person, I'm actually referring to this XML structure. Now what I can do, when I want to reference it, for instance here I'm referring to another XML structure. Just look at so this is the name element that references an XML structure. I have again another namespace, AKR, advanced key references. So I can define a type. If I want to have this type predefined, I say I want to refer to an XML structure, and I need some information for the actual reference. I have by default it's empty. This reference, this attribute is important because this is the identifier for the element to be a reference. And now what I get just by, so you see I'm writing anything, it's no valid key, so the link symbol is red, but as soon as I write something that is familiar, it will automatically make green. And if I'm not sure, I can even open a dialog and refer directly. And exactly the same for this type, this enumerations. I can just jump to the definition by clicking on the link symbol, and it will open the file. And here I'm defining type of person the same way with some default attributes. So as an author, if I decide to define a new enumeration, I just insert enumeration because it's I have a schema for this, a specialized schema for this. It will automatically insert all mandatory elements, so I know I have to define a name and I can insert some values. And it's already a key, and I can refer to it, I hope. What was the name? A test? Yeah, it's working. So just as easy as that, I can define new keys without even noticing it. Just like, well, I'm a native programmer, so I'm used to writing software. So this is what I usually do. I define functions and stuff like that, and then when I'm referring to them, I expect it to work. Now this is what I make available in DITA as well. So okay, now this is more comfortable for me as an author defining the XML structure. How does it help me to create an XML schema from it? Well, let's take a look at the script to create the schema. So for instance, enumeration. For the enumeration, before I couldn't create the XML schema for my type enumeration because I had no access to the definition. Now what I did is I again used Java to access my custom caching mechanism that stores all the keys inside. I have a method get key def location for this reference string, and then I implemented so this will return the file URL hash the ID of the element, and then I implemented with XSLT just a function that extracts the URL from my location, opens the document, and then looks for the element with the ID that was provided within my def location. So my file now I can just apply templates to the actual definition of my enumeration in this case, or to to the definition of my reference structure. And now if we can take again look on the dynamically generated schema. Okay, so you see I have person, and I have here my type of person. Okay, for some address it works. Okay, so here for the address, you see I have all the definition that was dynamically generated from a different file referenced by a key. Yeah, okay. So what we get from this at the end as a conclusion. So yeah, additionally we used implicit key definition and advanced key references to link these elements together, and Java to access this from our create XSD. So what we got so far, we have still full authoring assistance for syntax and semantics in writing our XML sample code. We can create dynamically our XML schema file, including all the references and stuff like this, and also authoring assistance for the referencing types, defining my XML structure. So actually the only thing that is missing right now, I still have to take care of my XML sample file, and I have to write this quite not easy to write convert protocol. So let's move to the final stage that combines everything together. Because as I said, dealing with this XML sample code is very common for us. So we have hundreds of samples, so it should be very comfortable for the author. So what I did, I directly integrated this dynamic XML definition into this concept of dynamic or implicit key definition. So what I did, let's take a look on the schema again. So here we have again the definition of the element for the XML type with this prefix and this key type. And so I have another two default attributes, DX default dynamic XML definition, type name, and type XSL. So this is the name of the XSD type that will be defined by this structure. So it's just the name with attached type, and I provide some XSL script that will create an XSD definition only for this type. So you can, well, I will take this other sample from the simple type because it's more easy to look on the XSL. So let's take a look on the definition here. Again, it looks very similar. I just have a different XSL. And what I do to create the definition for an enumeration, I just created a simple type. Well, it's the name of the enumeration extended by the type. It's a restriction to XS token. And for each definition for each entry in my definition, I create an XS enumeration with a value, and I also create this documentation with a name to provide this authoring assistance when I insert new values. And now my framework in the background will create an XSD file combining all the types you're referring to and create dynamically an XSD. So let's start, take a look. So what I did now also is create a new specialized element derived from XML code block. It's a DXD code block. Let's take a look on the XML. So I start with an empty code element. So now, I'm not referencing anything, so it will complain. So one of the missing parts before was, the author has to take care of this creating the sample file and so on. So now it's all automized. So I just say I want to jump to the file. Also, I didn't have one yet, but because the framework knows, okay, you want to create a sample for this XML structure. So it will create my sample code, and because it interprets my dynamically created XSD file, it will even create my sample code with all available elements and stuff like this. And it will also integrate here my dynamic URI. For it, again, it uses the convert protocol, but the convert protocol in this case is hidden behind this URN. And it provides some parameters, the root type and the root name. So this is all the information required for the framework in the background to create the schema. And still I have all the support. I can add the content completion and get this. And if I open the schema, you see I have my person type. And so here you exactly see this part is was generated by the script for the XML structure, and here this part was created by the script for enumeration. So I just dynamically compose this XSD file depending on the types that are referenced. So yeah, just like that. Well, so finally, what we got as advantage, we have really full user assistance for creating and maintaining sample code files. So also, because when I'm validating now this file, it can also validate the reference file according to the dynamically created schema. So when I'm validating my DITA map with hundreds of samples, and at the end it says it's green, it's really green. All my samples are consistent with my definition. And well, at least me and my colleagues agree, so there's nothing missing. Yeah, and I'm luckily even in time, so if you dare to ask any questions, I will try to answer them. Okay, so thanks for your listening.